Welcome to You Are Not a Frog, the podcast for GPs, doctors and other professionals in high-stress jobs. Working in today's pressured environment, you may feel like a frog in boiling water. Things have heated up so slowly that you might not have noticed the extra long days becoming the norm. You've got used to feeling constantly busy and often one crisis away from not coping. Let's face it, frogs only have two options: to stay in the pan, be boiled alive, or to hop out and leave. But you are not a frog, and that's where this podcast comes in. You can do more than just hop out or burn out. There are simple changes that you can make which will make a huge difference to your stress levels and help you enjoy life again. I'm your host, Dr. Rachel Morris, GP turned executive coach, speaker, specialist in workplace resilience and creator of the Shapes Toolkit training programme. In the podcast, I'll be chatting with friends, colleagues and experts, all who have an interesting take on this stuff, so that together we can take back control and thrive. If you want more resources, including CPD reflection forms for the podcast, then make sure you've signed up to the You Are Not a Frog Collective, and please share these podcasts with anyone who needs them. On with the episode. So it's brilliant to have with me on the podcast today Gary Hughes. Now, Gary Hughes is a practice manager, he's a blogger, he's an author, he's an educator and facilitator. But Gary, what are you doing at the moment? What roles are you working in at the moment?
It's great to be here doing this today, Rachel. The main one is practice manager. That's my full-time role. But I spend a lot of time writing. I enjoy writing, so I blog once a week. I've turned those first 52 of those blogs into a book. The second book will be out later in the year, so I'm on number 117. So I enjoy, outside of work, I enjoy writing around leadership in the context of general practice. And I try and spend as much time as I can educating, facilitating around leadership and helping our GP trainees in the practice.
That's great. And so I know that you've been putting out some stuff, quite a lot of stuff on LinkedIn during COVID. What have you been blogging about that's got a particularly, good reaction, or that's really chimed with people, struck a chord?
Well, most recently I put three pieces out that I felt were important for leaders in this situation that we're finding ourselves in at the moment. So the first one was around leading with love. I felt we had to change how we're leading, and more empathy and understanding. The second piece I wrote on was increasing visibility. I think at these times, whilst a leader may want to run to their room and hide, I think that's perfectly natural. Actually, the leader needs to be more visible because everybody else is feeling more vulnerable and dealing with all the uncertainty. So the second piece was around increasing your visibility. And the third piece was around moving forward, because I think, again, in these situations, there's that fight, flight, freeze situation. I think it's an important thing that an organisation doesn't freeze. I think you've got to keep moving forward. You might have to shorten your horizon. You might have to do things a little bit differently. But I think it's important that the organisation and the people understand that you are still moving forward, and that hopefully they can see that there is an end point to all of this and that you are progressing. So those were the three: leading with love, increasing your visibility, and to keep moving forward. And they've been well received. Really pleased.
I think people are really looking for stuff that's going to help them, lead through this crisis, because we've never been here before, have we? We've never been here before. We've never had to deal with this. We've never had something that has affected everybody in such a huge way. And there is no rule book for this.
No, I quite agree. I think, certainly in my career, I've never, ever been through a crisis. Plenty of crises that I've been through, but nothing like this. There's certainly, like yourself, lots of people that are able to offer great advice on dealing with the resilience and the mental well-being side, which isn't what I would be able to do. So I wanted to talk about how leadership has to change and how you can actually get through the crisis. So yeah, it's been well received. Really pleased. Had something to say, and hopefully it'll help people.
And what has surprised you about the way that people have reacted in the crisis? Have your team at work reacted in exactly the way that you thought they would have done?
Yeah, I think largely. I think that's been true for everybody I've seen. There's been some nice surprises, but I always say my practice have got a real can-do attitude. whatever's thrown at them, they will, band together and get through it. And largely that's been the case. So absolutely the anxiety levels have gone up, but they have largely gone on and battled through. So I think as I would have expected, although I couldn't predict it, what sort of crisis this was going to be like. I mean, it's monstrous, isn't it? I think outside of our practice, our CCG traditionally would not have worked with practices very well and supported them. But they've been brilliant. I have to say, our CCG, which traditionally haven't been great, they really have communicated well. Again, really important. We've had weekly meetings where we wouldn't have done before. They've worked with us. They've been prepared to be flexible. I suppose that leading with love side of things from their perspective, they haven't rigidly stuck to the rules. It's got to be done this way. They've understood our anxieties and concerns, and they've been empathetic and they changed. So that was a surprise. So I think people have acted in sometimes as you'd expect and sometimes not.
That's really interesting what you say about the CCG, and I think that a lot of people have, both within medicine and outside of medicine, have found that actually there's been some organisations that have traditionally been pretty, obstructive, seem to sort of just be making all the rules, and everything you want to do to try and change, they've been sort of stopping. Everything every time you want to make a change, they've been blocking, no, you've got to follow these guidelines, you've got to go through these processes. And actually in the COVID crisis, they've been absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
they've said, right, let's just get on. What can we do to support you? We've scrapped this rule, we've scrapped that rule, just get on. We're all just muddling through, we're doing our best in a crisis. And that has been, I know, so helpful for lots of people. There have been some organisations that, it has to be said, haven't been like that, and they've kept up the rules and the regulations and actually not been so helpful. And I think that will probably be remembered afterwards. But we were talking earlier, there was a really interesting paper from the British Psychological Society that's talking about people's reactions in this crisis, whether it be an organisational reaction or an individual reaction as a leader or as a team member, and talking about sort of three distinct phases. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on those, Gary. Being there, working in the practice, leading a large team of people. The three phases they talked about. First of all, the preparation phase, where you can see it coming, and I think we had a fair preparation phase, didn't we? It was pretty quick, but everyone just had to scrabble and change. It probably lasted maybe 1 or 2 weeks.
Very quick.
Yeah, it was quicker, and I am stunned by how quick people managed to pivot and change. Everything went virtual, didn't it? And I know certainly from the GP side of things, GPs who for the last 20 years have gone, over my dead body, am I ever doing a virtual consultation? Suddenly going, whoa, these are really good. We can do this. General practice was really flexible. I know we've had a lot of flexibility in law and accountancy, all these other places, and in secondary care as well. So the preparation, but then you've got this active phase where you see two distinct sort of reactions. First one is the heroics and the surge to action, which I think we definitely saw, everyone signing up to help and just dropping everything and saying, here I am, what can I do? Then you move through to the disillusionment and exhaustion as it carries on. And I think we've definitely seen quite a lot of that, and we're definitely a lot of us in the exhaustion phase right now. Then you've got the sort of recovery phase.
Really interesting,
the getting out of it. How are we gonna do things now, which can be really positive, but that this is where you might really start to see some of the psychological problems. So where do you think we are right now, or do you think we sort of oscillate between a couple of them?
It feels to me that we're at the sort of the cusp between the active and the recovery. I think we're just sort of looking at the recovery, and we've got to do that. Certainly, that's how it feels to me in the practice. I think, if you hear what's happening in the media and the government changes, that's how it feels, that we're just about to start or just starting that recovery phase. And I think it's certainly exciting times, and it's times for the leaders to really come to the front as well and make sure that keeping moving forward, we can do that now. I think as a practice, we certainly saw all of those three phases in some respect. Do you want me to talk a little bit about how it felt?
I'd love to hear what you
So
think.
looking back, it's interesting because I hadn't seen the model until we spoke about it. But looking back and reflecting on how we fitted, I think that first stage, the preparation stage, it was really quick, and there was almost not much time to do anything. And I think things for us in the practice, we did very little, but it was about making sure that we were safe as much as we would know what we had to do to be safe. So it was about getting PPE. Not much more than that. It was just making sure we had all the equipment that we needed to be safe. And even then, I think this crisis we've been through really described very well a VUCA world. I think there was so much uncertainty and volatility around. We didn't really know an awful lot what we had to do with PPE. We knew, so we focused on that. And there was, even though it was short, it felt to me that there was waiting. We knew it was coming, and there was an element. Okay, we're waiting for it to hit and for it to happen. When we got to the active phase, I think initially it felt like there was a lot of bunkering down. We were going to protect ourselves. We locked the doors very quickly, and they're still locked. Again, we upped the PPE. That was changing with the guidance to make sure we had more PPE, goggles and gowns instead of aprons. We put in place remote working, so all the phones and video consultations and GPs working at homes, and social distancing within the practice and the patients coming in. So there was a real bunkering down to protect us. We upped the comms as well. Then I think that visibility side of things. We, as a practice, we would have had a meeting once a month with our, if you like, partners and myself, the key team and the nurse manager, and we changed that to once a week. And it's hard work, it's tiring, exhaustion comes in then, but it's a good thing to make the decisions quickly when everything's changing so quickly, and also just keep in touch with people. And we started a lot of the meetings with asking, how are you feeling? We were reasonably open about how we were feeling at the time. So we upped the comms an awful lot, and it was good to see our CCG outside. They'd up the meetings and the comms, all virtually, but it's worked. The technology worked brilliantly. There was also putting systems in place. We had to change all the systems in place. Locally, there were hot sites, so we making sure we weren't seeing COVID patients or suspected COVID patients. And again, those phone only appointments, hardly anything face to face, and just systems for infection control as well. Just cleaning everything down and making sure there were breaks in the appointment systems to do this. And the management, I definitely consciously relaxed how I then managed.
Right.
It was that leading in with love. I didn't want to be. Whilst I wanted to be visible, and I found that a challenge to make sure I was, but I didn't want to worry too much about people sticking to processes and systems that weren't about safety, but about us doing the work. I just wanted them to feel relaxed as much as I could. If they were going a little bit earlier, coming in a little bit later, spending a bit more time talking, I wasn't going to worry about it too much. I wanted them to feel as relaxed as they could because anxiety levels were up. In that, at that active stage, I think they were the key things that we saw throughout this. Patients have been really good, actually. We wanted patients to stay away, and I suppose the visible signs, we didn't say stay away explicitly, but the visible signs were the locked doors and we're not booking face-to-face appointments, and they did. I suspect, it would be that their own anxiety levels would have been high and they wouldn't have wanted to come into the practice. But the patients have been great through this as well, really, really supportive. So those are, in the active stage, those are the things we've seen. I think you talked about people's exhaustion and, maybe that's there now as we're at the end of this. For me, it's come in waves. That there have been weeks. And interestingly, after the long weekends that we've had for Easter and Bank Holiday, people came back in, and whilst you would hope they would have been a bit lifted by a rest, actually it was the opposite. It was almost like, I've got to come back to this.
Mm.
And it feels like it's been a bit in waves. We've had phases where everybody's been up, and it has been more that everybody. There's been the odd one or two people have been a bit different, but it's almost been we've been together. Everyone's been a bit up, or everyone's been a bit down. So it feels like it's come in waves. That has.
Mm. I think that's really interesting observation about the bank holiday rest, because my observation is that rests are not quite as restful as they used to be.
No.
Whereas before you'd work really, really hard, like, oh, bank holiday, brilliant. Yeah. We could go see our friends, our family, chill out at the beach, have a barbecue. Yeah. Well, in England, yeah, maybe chill out in your house, have a barbecue, standing in the rain.
Yeah.
But after this bank holiday, it's like all of this is more of the same. I don't really need a bank holiday, because actually work is a welcome break from maybe the monotony of being at home. So I don't think we're getting as regenerated by our rest time as we used to.
Completely agree. We've it's reached Friday, and I think every one of us is ready for the weekend and to stop work for the week. But you come in on a Monday, and when you have the normal conversations, how was the weekend? Bit boring, didn't do much.
Same old.
And it doesn't. It's not recovery and recharge as it should be. And the longer bank holidays were not what we expected. We did find there was a little bit of a dip after those.
Even though the weather was marvellous, wasn't it? And I think the one thing about the whole COVID crisis is, and I know this is a really trivial thing, but because the weather has been so good, it does make people feel better. I dread to think what would have happened actually if the weather had been really awful the whole time. I think we'd all be feeling a lot worse. And it's weird, isn't it, how mood is linked to weather? But I think it is.
But it has. You're absolutely right. The weather has helped, definitely, most definitely.
So, Gary, you talked about this leading with love and the importance of doing that. How do you balance that with the need to, in a crisis, respond with strong leadership, to be what Daniel Goleman calls more of a sort of pace-setting leader, or a sort of command and control leader in a crisis that people sometimes do need? How did you get that balance right? Because I reckon it's probably a very difficult.
And you're right. And interestingly, I've not blogged too much through this COVID crisis. I've blogged less, but the three that I've mentioned, there is one other one that I wrote, and that was about tough love.
Okay.
So I wrote that because we'd had an exact situation. We'd had a difficulty in the team where there was just a situation that was coming across as a little bit unfair, and there was no explanation behind it. It didn't make sense. It wasn't justified. It was causing some ripples in the practice amongst the team, and I just felt, okay, this has to be stopped. I needed to speak to everybody together, but that's not possible at the moment. So I had to resort to email. So it was a very strongly worded email that essentially was. I pointed out the values as a practice that we would normally have, making everybody welcome and warm, friendly practice, supportive. We seem to be forgetting those in this particular instance, and just saying this has to stop. We have to draw a line under this and move forward. And a couple of weeks ago, that was now, and seems to be that it's worked. So whilst I have been through this, definitely more relaxed and cutting people a bit of slack, for want of a bit of expression. There's still, I think, when you get situations that are not helping, I think there is a time that a leader then has got to, take a firm line on it and help everybody overcome it and move forward.
Yeah, you really have to step up, don't you? Because if other people see that bad behaviour is continuing or stuff is just being let go, that's really demoralising for the rest of the team.
Absolutely. And as a leader, I've always taken the view that I'm not going to step in when people have their own sort of petty squabbles and differences and things. Resolve them yourselves. But I'll step in when it affects the practice, the organisation, the work. And it had got to that point. So, I'll step in firmly then as well. And, I think as long as people can understand why you're doing it, what you're doing, and you're doing it, proportionately and fairly and everything like that, then I think it's well received. And it was, I was being asked to do it as well as, needing to do it. So, so you have to, as well as leading with love, if you've got to be prepared to step in and be tough if needed.
Yeah, and I think this is going to actually be needed more and more, because I was talking to a friend who works in a completely different organisation, but, some of her staff initially, they were saying, okay, if you're not comfortable coming to work, you can stay at home, et cetera, et cetera. And now there's some slightly dubious reasons for staying at home, or there's some reasons that can't really be sustained long term, that they're now going to have to be saying, actually, we need a bit of proof. We need to follow some HR policies about who's got to come in, who doesn't. And so it's changed from this whole preparation, let's all just make sure everyone is okay, to actually now we have to run this organisation and do the best for our clients. And actually, I'm sorry, but this is what you're contracted to do. And unless there is a good reason, now that is really tough to move to saying that, when actually we've been saying to everyone, let's just do what you're comfortable with. We just need to look after everybody.
Yeah, it is, and I think I think for every manager and leader, you've got to be careful right at the beginning that you don't sort of lay down a road that is going to be full of pitfalls for you, and you've got to make sure that if you're saying something at the beginning, you can be consistent with it. And so, to give you an example, our admin team, we've had to have 2 people off for shielding. They were well enough to be working, but shielding advice, they had to be off. We could have set them up for remote working, and we had the technology and everything, but we didn't need to do it. We didn't have enough work there. We didn't really need to do it. I wasn't convinced that I wanted for IG rules to give them the technology in a home. So we decided, no, we're not going to do that. Now, we've had situations since then where, again, we've had the request, can I work from home? I've got the technology, and it might have been a better one for us to do. It actually might have made more sense. Because I didn't do it at the beginning, I wanted to make sure, no, I'm not going to do it now, because, as it's the situation you just described. I think as long as at the beginning, just be clear on what you're doing, what the goals are, what you need, and thinking ahead, actually, can I be consistent with this? Or would I, possibly come unstuck if I'm asked again, or slightly different way? So, yeah.
Can I just offer a bit of challenge there, though? Don't rules have to change? Because at the beginning of the crisis, we had no idea what was going to happen. We had no idea. We didn't even know what the virus, what it did. Who was going to be affected more. So, is it the case that you should never change a rule that you've set at the beginning, or actually in view of the VUCA world, the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, the fact that we're now new stuff is emerging all the time and things are changing, we can then change the rules? And if so, then how do we change the rules in a compassionate manner?
I think fair challenge. I think, I'm great. I'm really glad. I'm really glad, not great. I'm glad that rules have changed. Our CCG have changed loads of rules. Yeah. That's fantastic. And I suppose what I'm more talking about is I'd be prepared to change the rules and offer flexibility, but not articulating this very well. Actually, I think you can be flexible and adjust things, but you still can make sure that you don't fall into a trap and have one member of the team saying, well, you let that person do it, why can't I do it? And
it needs to be fair.
You've got to have the parameters right. Everybody's got to understand, well, what's the goal and the purpose of what we're doing. But you're absolutely right. Rules do change. I mean, we would never have let our GPs work. Well, I say never have let. They would never have worked from home, our GPs. They have been. Our admin team have never worked from home. They still don't need to. There's not the need to. Now, actually, our admin team, I think it's difficult for the admin team to work from home. I could work from home quite easily, and there would have been a good reason for me to say right at the beginning, when they said, if you can work from home, would have been a good reason for me to say, okay, I'll work from home. but I took the conscious decision and communicated it as well that I won't be working from home, because I think that would have set a really bad example as a leader. And then somebody else could have said, what about me? Why can't I work?
Yes.
I can do this from home. So it's that, it's making sure you're careful about what you're agreeing at the beginning, and have some flexibility maybe, but not cause a problem.
I think it's this thing about fairness that really triggers people, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I don't know whether I answered that clearly.
No, I think you answered it really, really well. I think it's a really difficult one, because what is fair in this crisis?
God,
how do you make that decision?
Absolutely. And in terms of that exact, how do you make the decisions? And this is another thing I've written about, actually, is when I'm faced with a really, really difficult decision, I tend to resort to what's the best for the practice, not what's the best for the person or what's the easiest for me to make, or whatever other reason. What's the best for the practice? That practice has been there since the 1950s. It's going to be there, long, long after me and anybody else that's worried about fairness. And then I tend to say, right, what's the best decision for the practice? And I'll, when it's a really tricky decision, that's how I'll make it.
That's a good version of the Stevens question. Have you heard about the Stevens question?
No.
I came across this fairly recently. I love it. So in the there was a Cambridge rowing coach called, I can't remember his first name, Stevens was his second name, and he's his name's listed on the board of the Cambridge Boat House. And I think there's a book about this. And the Cambridge Boat Club team, in their manifesto is to beat Oxford in the boat race. Okay. That is the reason for their boat club existence. Now, as a rowing team, you have all sorts of opportunities throughout the year to do lots of different races, different heads of the rivers race, different this, different that. But what Stevens made them do is every time they had an opportunity to do a race or a training opportunity or a diet changing opportunity or a physio opportunity or something, the question that they would ask themselves
does it make the boat
go? Will it make the boat go faster? And apparently, this has been really taken on by rowing teams. And apparently, and someone I'm sure will correct me if I'm wrong, at the Sydney Olympics, the people who rowed in the 8 there, they didn't go to the opening ceremony of the Olympics because they asked the question, will this make the boat go faster? And they thought, late nights, a lot of preparation. No, it won't make our boat go faster. They didn't go. And so whenever I do sort of team training, I'm always thinking of this Stevens question. Will it make up? What is your Stevens question?
It's a brilliant one. I came across that. I was school governor, and as a governing body, we wanted to define our purpose, and we had a facilitator help us, and she introduced us to exactly that and said, that was so simple. So it is a great one, really, really good.
And I was just trying to think how that would apply to individuals and people. And I think if you're asking, will this make what's best for our practice? Will this make our practice better? If you've got someone who is going to be very affected by the decision, so she won't be working or he won't be working as well, then it's not going to make the practice better. So then you'll make that decision, but with the basis of the practice.
And absolutely, and I think when I've been in those situations, the context of what's best for the practice, you might be thinking from a patient perspective. It might be about, can we carry on delivering these services? It might be a financial perspective. So that's such a broad thing. So you might be looking at it in different ways, but honing it to what's the best for the practice. I've always been safe making the decisions that way.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because otherwise if you're a leader who's very people focused, and there was an episode of the podcast with Gita Trevorrow-Seymour we did recently about the sort of different social styles. So if you're someone who has you're very people focused, you like harmony and you don't like upsetting anybody, then some of your leadership decisions are quite likely to be quite skewed towards trying to keep everybody happy.
Yes.
Which is a very difficult place to be, because you can't keep everyone happy all of the time, can you?
No, absolutely. And I think it's natural, as leaders, we all want to be liked, and we want to make people happy. So it's natural to be that way. Interestingly, though, going back to the tough love, whenever I've had a situation, they're in the minority. I think for most leaders it should be that way. That I've had to be firm and hard and maybe give somebody or a smaller group, a bad message, and I've needed to take a position where I'm being more directive. It's always been well received. It's, you usually get to that point where there's others that are seeing, we want that. So I've you're always anxious and nervous about being or providing that particular type of leadership. But when you do it, it's always well received. I suspect if you're doing it all the time, it might not be. But when you're not that way all the time, and then you do it, it's usually because it needs it. There's people in the organisation will know that.
People actually do need it. And I, thinking back to when I was sort of a very junior doctor, or starting working in different organisations and doing different things, actually you can go off on one and be a bit whingy and be this, and actually sometimes someone just putting it back going, actually this isn't helpful, can you do this? It's a bit of at the time you feel a bit packed off, but actually it's a bit of a relief that someone's actually called you out on the behaviour and said can you do it?
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering, it's like you said, if you had doing the tough love all the time, then yes, it wouldn't go down so well. But you mentioned earlier vulnerability in leadership, and I'm just wondering where that fits in with then how your tough love is received. What are your thoughts on that?
Just explain a little bit more.
Yeah, explain what I mean by that. I was thinking, my thought process were that actually I reckon your staff will accept a lot of tough love from you because you model vulnerability in your leadership. So they've built up lots of trust in you.
Okay.
And so you model, well, this is where I'm wrong and I'm not sure about this here. And, and you're modeling that to your team so that when you say, actually, guys, this has got to stop, it's not helpful, they'll take it because you've been vulnerable before. Am I?
Yes. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think if they're getting more of the love than or the nice love, the good love than the tough love, absolutely. So I think they will go along with that. I think the other important thing though is understanding why you're saying something, because even if you're being nice and easygoing, they still want to understand that there are some goals that we're working towards. The practice is going somewhere and they're going somewhere. So I think whichever you're doing, you're being that firm leader or that easygoing leader, I think they want to understand that there are some goals, there's some purpose to what you're saying, what they're being asked to do. So I think that's important, very important too.
Yeah. So Gary, as we look forward to, as we are looking into the future, not we're looking forward to this, as we are looking into the future, moving from this sort of active phase and probably the disillusionment and exhaustion bit of the active phase into the recovery phase, what would your top tips for anyone who's leading, even one other person or a team, what would they be? What do you think people really need to keep in front of their mind?
Yeah, I've thought a little bit about this and how we can look at this simply. I think for this recovery phase, to me, this is a journey. We have to look at this as a journey. There are three things that I think we need to think of. Is first, where are we heading? So much has changed. I think everybody's acknowledged that we're not heading back to 10-minute consultations and packed waiting rooms and the same way it was done. So I think to just have that vision of where we're heading. I think, and make sure that you're clear about that and you're communicating it to your team and also the patients as well. Be thinking about who are you going there with, because we're all working collaboratively now, and the networks are so important. So I think that, where are we heading? I think the second part of this is, what are we taking on this journey? Because there's so much that's changed. Are we going to be taking everything with us? Are we going to be taking the telephone consultations, the video consultations, the locked doors? So I think, we're heading somewhere. What are we going to take with us? And I think we need to make sure that, we're taking some time out to do some reflection and learning about all of this. and involving everybody, and internally and externally as well, because there are certain things that others have done. I talked about our CCG that have really helped us, and that there are probably things that we've done that have helped others, but it'll also be the other way around. There's probably things that we've done that haven't helped others, and vice versa. So I think having that reflection, learning, and involving internal and external parties, I think is an important thing. If nothing else, for these sorts of things, use your SEA process. If you follow an SEA process on these things,
just explain for people that don't know what an SEA is.
Oh, sorry. Your significant event. We've had a significant event that might be good or bad. So if you want just a framework to hold a session on, reflection and learning for this whole crisis, use that process. It'll give you the main talking points, and you can see what's been good and what's been bad, and hopefully it'll give you an idea of what you're going to be taking with you on the journey, and what you're not going to take. And then the third part that I think we have to think about is, what have we got to get along the way whilst we're going on this journey? Because there's going to be some things that we've done, and if I take video consultations maybe as one thing, or even telephone consultations for that, we're probably going to take those on the journey. They need to be improved. So along the way, what have we got to get along the way? And that might be improving things. It might be making things safer. There might be things that we wanted to drop as well. We need to be flexible on this journey. There might be things that we say, we're going to take and then we're going to drop. I'm sure a part of this getting along the way will be building the staff back up and the team back up, the resilience and the mental well-being of the staff as well. You've probably got to do that along the way. And thinking about when you're going to start all of this as well, this journey. So that, for the recovery phase, nice and simply, that's how I've looked at it, as a journey with where are we heading, what are we taking, and what have we got to get along the way. Yeah.
I think that's really good advice personally as well. Because I think there's all been stuff in lockdown that actually we quite enjoyed. That actually some of us breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief when certain things just stopped. We didn't have to do them anymore. And I think reflecting on, personally, where am I going? Where am I heading? What do I want out of life? What are we taking from lockdown that we want to continue? What do we want to stop doing? What do we want to continue? What do we want to start doing? And then, what else do I need now to live the life that I really want to? There's an amazing quote from a chap called Adam Grant, who is a business psychologist, I think. He writes a lot in the Harvard Business Review. He has a brilliant podcast called Work Life with Adam Grant. He did a quote that really struck me. He says, what we're seeing is that people are grieving for a life that made them freaking miserable. So during this crisis, take the opportunity not just to sort of pivot your business, but actually pivot how you're living life to live in a more meaningful and purposeful way. I just love that quote, because I think my feeling is that we'd got ourselves quite wound up into this frenzy of activity, particularly if you've got, teenage children. I was like taking them to places and doing this and that and racing around. And, what is it that, and I think that the crisis, even though it's been dreadful, has in some ways given us a time to reflect and go, actually, what is life about? What is the meaning? Really?
Absolutely. I'm not sure that maybe some people, maybe it's just me. I don't feel I've found the answers. I feel I've had the time to slow down and think. I'm not sure I've had the answers.
Yes, and I think it's getting the answers is really important. Yeah. In fact, we've got a handout that I'll make available, which is a stop, start, continue checklist. So if you want to download that, and there's lots of questions in there to help you reflect on this and just think about actually what is it that I want to carry on, what is it I want to stop, what learning is there during this that I can take forward. So Gary, I'm afraid we're out of time, but will you come back again and we'll talk some more?
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to.
So Gary, if people wanted to read your blogs, find out more about your book, find out more about you, where should they go?
LinkedIn's the best place. That's where I'm most active. And I think if you search for Gary Hughes on LinkedIn, it'll come up quite highly. There's a blog once a week. There's a book available, Leadership in Practice, which you can, again, through LinkedIn, you'll find out about it there.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Ask me to connect. I'd love to connect with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Gary. It's been really a fascinating conversation. And, good luck with your going to the recovery phase with your practice. I'd be really interested to hear in a few months' time, what have you kept? What have you got rid of? Because my sneaking suspicion there's going to be quite a lot that we realised we didn't need to do in general practice.
I hope so. A good question. I look forward to that.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, we'll speak soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thanks for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please share it with your friends and colleagues. Please subscribe to my You Are Not a Frog email list and subscribe to the podcast. And if you have enjoyed it, then please leave me a rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. So keep well, everyone. You're doing a great job. You got this.